In the autumn of 1938, in a small laboratory in Berlin, two chemists bombard a lump of uranium with neutrons. They expect nothing unusual. Instead, the atom splits in two. It releases a burst of energy nobody predicted. That single afternoon leads to weapons that could end a war in a flash. It leads to power plants that light entire nations. It leads to machines that survive in the coldest reaches of space. Now, picture that afternoon never happening. No split atom, no chain reaction, no bomb, no reactor. Just the same coal, the same oil, the same fire humans have used for centuries. For the next 80 years, that's the only fire we get. The nucleus stays locked. Nobody in Berlin writes a letter that eventually reaches Einstein. Nobody breaks ground on a secret laboratory in the New Mexico desert. The uranium sitting in mines across the world stays exactly what it always was. Just heavy gray rock, nothing more. The first difference arrives in the summer of 1945. Without an atomic bomb, Japan does not surrender in early August. The war in the Pacific grinds forward. American planners finalize Operation Downfall, a full invasion of the Japanese home islands. Landing craft prepare to hit the beaches of Kyushu. Historians who studied the real invasion plans estimated casualties, military and civilian combined, that could have dwarfed the death toll from the two bombs that, in this world, are never built. The war doesn't end in a single flash of light over a city. It ends slowly, island by island. Months later, in the mud, 9 years pass. The Cold War begins anyway. The United States and the Soviet Union still glare at each other across a divided Europe. They still race to build the biggest army, the fastest bomber, the longest range missile. But there are no nuclear warheads waiting in silos. There is no doctrine of mutually assured destruction, the invisible fence that, in our timeline, made both superpowers terrified to fire the first shot. Historians still debate exactly what that fear prevented. In this world, we find out. Standoffs that once ended with a phone call and a quiet retreat now end with tanks crossing borders instead. By the 1970s, the biggest change is quieter, and it happens inside power plants, in the air over every city. In our real world, hundreds of nuclear reactors eventually rise across more than 30 countries. Together, they generate close to a tenth of the planet's electricity, almost none of it releasing carbon into the sky. France alone would run nearly two-thirds of its entire electric grid on the atom. In this world, none of that capacity exists. Every one of those missing power plants gets replaced with coal, oil, and gas. Smokestacks multiply across skylines that never clear. Air pollution from burning fossil fuels already kills several million people a year in our real timeline. Remove nuclear power's share of clean electricity from the grid, and that number keeps climbing. Decade after decade, city after city, lung after lung. Children grow up wearing smog masks on days their grandparents, in our timeline, never needed one. Coal trains run longer and more often. Coastal cities import more oil, more tankers, more spills. Families still turn their lights on every evening. They just never learn what it costs somewhere else, in a mine or a refinery or a stretch of gray sky over a distant city to keep them lit. The 1980s bring submarines that can't do what nuclear submarines do in our world. Real nuclear propulsion lets a vessel stay underwater for months, circling the globe without surfacing once for air or fuel. Without it, navies stay chained to diesel engines and to refueling ships. The undersea world stays shallower, slower, easier to detect. Medicine changes too, quietly, inside almost every hospital on Earth. In our real world, tens of millions of nuclear medicine procedures happen every single year. Radioactive isotopes find tumors that no ordinary scan could otherwise catch. They treat cancers like thyroid cancer with a precision no scalpel can match. In this altered world, none of those isotopes exist. Diagnoses arrive later. Some cancers are found only after it's too late to act. A quiet, headline-free technology that saves lives simply never gets invented. Then come the twist almost nobody expects. Look up at the night sky in this world, and Neptune stays a blur. Pluto stays a smudge of light nobody has ever seen up close. The real spacecraft that showed humanity the outer solar system, Voyager, Cassini, New Horizons, all of them ran on the heat of slowly decaying plutonium. Past Mars, sunlight is simply too weak for solar panels to work. Without that power source, our probes stop cold at the asteroid belt. Even the rovers exploring Mars right now, in our real timeline, would have frozen and gone silent within a single Martian winter. They'd be starved of the isotope heater that keeps their electronics alive through nights colder than any place on Earth. In this world, humanity's most distant photograph ends at Jupiter. Everything beyond it stays a mystery for 100 years longer than it needed to. So what kind of world is this in the end? It's a world that never built a weapon capable of ending a city in a single afternoon. No Hiroshima, no Nagasaki, no stockpile of thousands of warheads sitting ready, minutes from launch. Almost everyone would call that part a mercy, but it's also a world with dirtier air and a longer, bloodier ending to the Second World War. A world with fewer answers for cancer patients and fewer photographs of worlds far from our own. A world that looked at the same discovery and decided it was only ever a danger, never also a tool. The atom itself was never good and never evil. It was only ever a choice. And on one quiet afternoon in 1938, in a lab in Berlin, this version of history chose never to find out what that choice could have built.